The crystalline spires of New Centauri's grand arena pierced the violet sky like ancient spears, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside his private preparation chamber, Champion Zexthor of the Centauri Empire studied his reflection in a wall of polished quantum glass. His biomechanical armor, a masterpiece of galactic engineering, hummed with barely contained power. 4 arms, each enhanced with neural accelerators, adjusted the ceremonial badges that marked his 1,000 victories. Your vital signs indicate elevated stress patterns, Champion, announced the chamber's eye. Shall I adjust your neural dampeners? Zexthor's upper lip curled in annoyance. Unnecessary. My readings are perfect, as always. He activated his energy blade, watching the plasma edge ignite with a satisfying hiss. For 300 years, he had dominated the galactic combat tournament. 300 years of flawless victories against the finest warriors of 1,000 worlds. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. Champion, your presence is requested in the tournament council chamber. The AI informed him. It appears there is a situation regarding this cycle's competitor list. Zexthor deactivated his blade with a practiced flourish. A situation. In my tournament. He allowed himself a small laugh. Ever since the Centauri Empire had established the games as a way to settle interspecies disputes without full-scale war, there had never been a situation he couldn't handle with his blades. The council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, its walls alive with flowing data streams and historical battle recordings. 12 representatives from the major galactic powers sat around a hovering table of pure energy. Grand Arbiter Velox, her crystalline form shimmering with concern, acknowledged Zexthor's entrance with a slight bow. Champion, we have received an unusual application for this cycle's tournament. Velox began, her voice resonating through the chamber. A representative from Sol System's 3rd planet, Earth. Zexthor's secondary hearts skipped a beat in amusement. The primitive world that barely achieved FTL travel a century ago. Surely, this is a jest. The application meets all technical requirements. Another council member added, their tentacles waving in agitation. Their candidate has passed the preliminary trials. Zexthor moved to the center of the chamber, his armor's sensors interfacing with the room's holographic systems. A projection appeared, combat footage from the trials. The human moved with unusual grace, wielding what appeared to be a primitive metal sword. No energy field, no quantum enhancements, not even basic neural augmentation. This is absurd, Zexthor declared. The tournament is meant to showcase the pinnacle of combat evolution. This, human, is using technology that was obsolete before their species discovered fire. Nevertheless, Velox continued, they have qualified. The rules, written in the aftermath of the last Great War, are explicit. Any species that can complete the trials must be allowed to compete. Zexthor watched the footage again. The human female, according to their binary biology, moved in patterns his combat computers couldn't quite predict. There was something almost organic about her style, a fluidity that defied the precise calculations of modern combat algorithms. Very well, he finally said, his voice dripping with carefully measured condescension. Let them compete. It will serve as an educational moment for their species. Sometimes the young races need to learn their place through demonstration. As he turned to leave, Velox's voice caught him. Champion, there is one more thing. The human candidate left a message for you specifically. The hologram changed to display text in simple galactic standard. Looking forward to showing you what primitive really means. Best regards, Sarah Chen, inheritor of the Yang School of Sword Arts. For the first time in 3 centuries, Zexthor felt something unfamiliar stir in his enhanced nervous system. Not fear, surely not fear, but something that his combat computers couldn't quite categorize. He dismissed it as a minor malfunction and strode from the chamber, his armor servos whirring with each confident step. Let the human come with her ancient weapon and her presumptuous confidence. He would show her, and all of humanity, why the Centauri Empire had ruled the tournament for 3 centuries. After all, how could mere human instinct hope to compete with millennia of perfectly engineered combat evolution? In the depths of his enhanced consciousness, a small voice whispered that he might be about to learn the answer to that question. He silenced it with a neural command, but somehow it lingered like an echo in his mind. The registration hall of the Grand Arena buzzed with activity as warriors from across the galaxy prepared for the tournament. Quantum-enhanced beings mingled with silicon-based life forms, while energy creatures floated in containment fields designed to prevent accidental dimensional rifts. Among them walked Sarah Chen, looking deceptively ordinary in her simple black training suit. The betting terminals lining the walls flashed with constantly updating odds. Human Challenger, 10,000 to 1, scrolled across their displays in various alien scripts. Sarah smiled, pausing to watch the numbers change. Her hand rested casually on the hilt of her katana, its well-worn grip marking it as a training tool rather than a museum piece. "Pardon, but are you lost?" A hovering service drone approached her. "The Historical Reenactment Center is in the Entertainment District." "Registration desk?" Sarah asked, ignoring the implied insult. "Straight ahead." But the drone's optical sensors whirred in confusion. "That's for tournament competitors." Sarah nodded her thanks and continued walking. The crowd parted before her, not out of respect, but from a sort of collective bafflement. A Martian cyborg warrior, his body more machine than flesh, openly scoffed as she passed. "The human thinks this is some kind of costume party," he said to his companions in Galactic Standard, clearly intending for her to hear. The registration desk was staffed by a being composed entirely of crystalline computational matrices. It looked up from its terminal, light refracting through its form in patterns of confusion. Name and world of origin: Sarah Chen, Earth. She placed her tournament qualification chip on the scanner. The crystal beam's structure reorganized itself several times as it processed her credentials. There must be some mistake. These qualifying scores, they can't be correct. "They are." Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm. "Would you like me to demonstrate?" Before the registrar could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Champion Zexthor had arrived for his ceremonial pre-tournament appearance, his 4 arms raised in greeting as supporters cheered. His biomechanical armor gleamed under the arena lights, each plate covered in microscopic computers that could predict and counter almost any attack. Sarah watched him with genuine interest, studying his movements with the careful eye of someone who had spent a lifetime learning to read opponents. Zexthor caught her gaze, his enhanced vision zooming in to analyze her. She smiled and gave him a small bow, a gesture that seemed to confuse him more than any sign of intimidation would have. "Your weapon requires inspection," the registrar announced, regaining her attention. A scanning drone descended from the ceiling, its sensors preparing to analyze her katana. "Of course." Sarah drew the blade in one fluid motion that made several nearby warriors step back instinctively. The scanner hummed as it passed over the steel. "This is primitive," the drone declared. "No power source detected. No quantum field generators. No neural interface ports. Pure metallurgical construction. Japanese Tamahagane steel, traditionally folded," Sarah explained. "The blade was my teacher's, and her teachers before her. The art I practice is older than most of the technology in this room." A laugh rippled through the gathering crowd. The Martian cyborg stepped forward, his augmented voice booming. "You expect to compete against modern warriors with a piece of sharpened metal. This is an insult to the tournament." Sarah sheathed her sword with practiced grace. "Every blade has a story. This one's story isn't finished yet." She turned to face Zexthor, who had been watching the exchange with barely concealed amusement. "Champion, would you agree that the true measure of a warrior isn't in their weapons, but in how they use them?" Zexthor's combat computers raced to analyze her words for hidden meanings, finding none. "Pretty philosophy," he replied. "But this is not a poetry contest. This is combat at its highest evolution. You're Dedication to tradition is admirable, but ultimately futile. Evolution. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Interesting choice of words. Did you know that on Earth, some of our most successful species aren't the ones with the most advanced adaptations, but the ones most capable of adapting? The betting odds on the wall display jumped to 15,000 to 1. Several beings rushed to place wagers against the human challenger, certain of easy profits to come. Your species' metaphors are as primitive as your weapons, Sexthor declared, though something in her calm demeanor had triggered warning signals in his combat systems that he couldn't quite explain. Sarah turned back to the registrar, her registration chip now validated. Thank you for your help. Oh, and champion. She spoke without turning around. You might want to run a diagnostic on your left. Secondary servo actuator. There's a micro-fraction delay in its response time. Barely noticeable, but in the right circumstances. She left the sentence unfinished as she walked away, leaving Sexthor to quickly run a systems check. To his shock and growing unease, she was right. A 0.3-second delay that even his own systems hadn't detected. How had she noticed it just by watching him walk? For the first time in centuries, the champion of the Centauri Empire felt something that his combat computers had no protocol for handling: uncertainty. The preliminary rounds of the Galactic Combat Tournament began with characteristic spectacle. Quantum fireworks exploded in carefully calculated patterns, while gravity manipulators created sweeping waves of force that rippled through the stadium. In his private observation pod, Sexthor watched the opening matches with growing unease. The Martian cyborg who had mocked Sarah Chen in registration lay defeated on the arena floor, his advanced combat systems offline. She stood calmly nearby, her katana sheathed, bowing respectfully to her fallen opponent. The match had lasted exactly 47 seconds. Replay analysis complete, his AI assistant announced. Unable to identify primary combat algorithm. Subject appears to be operating without predictable patterns. Impossible, Sexthor muttered. Every fighter has patterns. That's the foundation of modern combat science. He gestured with his upper right arm, bringing up multiple holographic replays of the match. The Martian had attacked with textbook perfection, his augmented limbs moving at speeds that should have been impossible for an unenhanced human to track, let alone counter. But Sarah had simply not been where the attacks landed. Each movement flowed into the next like water around rocks, never meeting force with force, yet somehow always ending in perfect striking position. Next match beginning, the AI announced. Human Challenger versus K'tal Combat Mind Collective. Sexthor leaned forward. The K'tal were legendary for their hive mind combat systems, able to process millions of possible attack combinations per second. Their representative was a floating sphere of pure energy, capable of generating weapons from any angle. Surely now the human's luck would end. Sarah entered the arena still wearing her simple training suit, declining the offered energy shields and protective fields. The Kevil being pulsed with confident patterns, its surface rippling with calculated attack formations. The match began. The K'tal launched a perfect assault, creating 37 energy blades that attacked from all possible angles. The stadium's quantum computers calculated zero probability of evasion. Sarah moved. What happened next defied the arena's recording systems. The human seemed to flow between the energy blades like smoke, her movements following no discernible pattern. The K'tal adjusted instantly, its hive mind processing new attack vectors. Sarah's katana flashed once, twice, moving in ways that seemed to ignore the basic laws of geometry. The K'tal's perfect energy sphere developed a hairline crack, then shattered. Time elapsed. 33 seconds. Analysis, Sexthor demanded. Unable to compute, his AI responded. Subject's movements do not conform to any known combat forms, suggesting possible malfunction in arena sensors. But Sexthor's enhanced vision had caught something the computers missed. Just before each movement, Sarah's eyes had shifted slightly, reading her opponent's energy patterns. She wasn't fighting the attacks. She was reading the intent behind them, and simply not being where the danger was. The tournament continued. A Jovian war construct, 3 Venusian blade dancers, even a temporal warrior from the 5th dimension fell before her. None lasted more than a minute. The betting terminals had stopped taking wagers entirely, their prediction algorithms having crashed trying to calculate the impossible. In the competitors' ready room, Zexthor watched as Sarah sat quietly between matches, eyes closed, apparently meditating. Her katana rested across her lap, looking absurdly simple among the high-tech weapons surrounding her. He approached, his combat computers running at maximum capacity to analyze her. "Your technique," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "It doesn't match any known combat style in the galaxy." Sarah opened her eyes, regarding him with that same calm interest she'd shown since arriving. "That's because it's not a technique, champion. It's an understanding." Understanding of what? Of space, time, intention, and most importantly, of ourselves. She stood, smoothing her training suit. "Your systems are designed to predict and counter known patterns, but life itself has no pattern. True combat isn't about imposing order on chaos. It's about becoming one with it." Warning signals flashed across Zexthor's neural interface. Her words triggered combat response protocols, yet contained no actionable threat patterns. It was maddening. "In our final match," she continued, "I hope you'll fight as yourself, not as your programming dictates. It would be an honor to face the warrior beneath the enhancements." She bowed and walked away, leaving Zexthor staring after her. For the first time in his centuries-long career, his combat computers offered him no tactical advice, no statistical advantages, no calculated strategies. They, like him, had begun to realize that they faced something their creators had never anticipated. A human who had transcended the very concept of predictable combat. The final match would not be a battle of technology versus tradition, but of computation versus comprehension. And Zexthor was no longer certain which was superior. The grand arena fell silent as the final match approached. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy held their breath, their combined anticipation creating a weight in the air that even the gravity regulators couldn't quite control. Champion Zexthor stood in his preparation chamber, running final diagnostics on his combat systems. All enhancement fields at maximum efficiency, his AI reported. Neural response times optimized. Combat prediction algorithms updated with all available data from the human's previous matches. Zexthor activated his energy blade, watching its rainbow-hued plasma field spark to life. Probability of victory. For the first time in his memory, the AI hesitated. Insufficient data for meaningful prediction. The champion's 4 arms tensed simultaneously. He had dismissed his usual honor guard, sending away the drones and attendants. Something told him this battle required his complete, undivided attention. The arena's quantum steel gates parted. Zexthor strode out to thunderous applause, his biomechanical armor gleaming under the artificial suns. Across the combat zone, Sarah Chen entered with the same quiet grace she had shown throughout the tournament. Her katana remained sheathed, her posture relaxed but alert. "Final match," the arena AI announced, its voice resonating through the stadium. Champion Zexthor of the Centauri Empire versus Sarah Chen of Earth. Combat will continue until submission or incapacitation. Begin in 3, 2, 1. Zexthor launched his opening assault before the countdown finished, his 4 arms becoming blurs of motion as they wielded energy blades in patterns proven lethal across 3 centuries of combat. Sarah's response defied every combat algorithm in his system. She stepped forward, directly into what should have been certain death. The champion's blades passed through empty air. Somehow, she had moved just enough to avoid each strike while maintaining her advance. His combat computers screamed conflicting warnings as she entered his optimal attack range. "You're fighting yourself," Sarah said quietly, still not drawing her weapon. "Your enhancements are looking for patterns where none exist, trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing shape." Zexthor snarled and activated his temporal distortion field, a technology that should have made his movements too fast for any unaugmented being to track. Sarah moved like wind through trees, her body flowing around his attacks with an efficiency that bordered on impossibility. "Impossible," he growled, launching a barrage of energy projectiles from his armor's auxiliary weapons. "No human reflexes can match quantum-enhanced combat systems." "They don't have to," Sarah replied, finally drawing her katana. The simple steel blade caught the arena lights as she deflected the energy bolts with movements so precise they seemed almost casual. "We learned long ago that trying to be faster than a machine is pointless. Instead, we learned to read intention." The champion's combat computers began to overload, trying to calculate attack patterns against an opponent who seemed to exist in a state of constant adaptation. Sarah pressed forward, her blade moving in ways that his predictive algorithms couldn't track. "Your systems are perfect," she continued, each word punctuated by the clash of steel against energy fields. "They analyze, predict, and respond with incredible precision. But that's also their weakness. They can only respond to what they understand, and they cannot understand what has no fixed pattern." Zexthor's armor reported multiple system conflicts as it tried to match her unpredictable style. She wasn't fighting according to any recognizable school of combat. Each movement emerged naturally from the last, like a conversation rather than a predetermined sequence. "What is this?" he demanded, his forearms moving in increasingly desperate patterns. "What combat philosophy is this?" "It's not philosophy," Sarah said, her blade finding gaps in his defenses that shouldn't have existed. "It's life. Humans don't excel because we're stronger or faster. We excel because we never stop adapting, never stop learning, never become fixed in our ways." The champion's legendary focus began to slip as his combat computers fell into recursive loops, unable to predict an opponent who seemed to rewrite her own patterns with every movement. Sarah's blade danced closer, not striking to kill but systematically dismantling his defenses. "Your technology is incredible," she acknowledged, disabling one of his energy blades with a precise strike. "But you've relied on it so long, you've forgotten something fundamental about combat." "And what's that?" Zexthor asked, even as his systems reported cascading failures. "That the greatest weapon isn't the blade," Sarah said, moving inside his guard in a way his computers insisted was mathematically impossible. "It's the mind that guides it." Her katana flashed once more, finding a crucial joint in his armor that even he hadn't known was vulnerable. The champion of 3 centuries fell to his knees, his combat systems offline, forearms limp at his sides. The arena erupted in shocked silence, 50,000 beings trying to process what they had just witnessed. Sarah Chen, human warrior from Earth, stood calmly before the fallen champion, her ancient blade catching the light of 3 dying suns. In the days following the tournament, the grand arena buzzed with unprecedented activity. Quantum networks across the galaxy struggled to process the implications of what had occurred. A human, using nothing but an ancient metal sword and unaugmented skill, had defeated the most advanced combat systems in known space. Zexthor sat in his private meditation chamber, his armor removed for the first time in decades. Engineers had spent days trying to explain his defeat through technical analysis, searching for system failures or hidden technological advantages in Sarah's weapon. They found nothing. "You wished to see me, champion." Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She still wore her simple training suit, her katana at her side. "Former champion," Zexthor corrected, gesturing for her to enter. "Please, sit. I've been thinking." Sarah knelt gracefully on the meditation cushion across from him. The chamber's ambient lighting cast soft shadows that danced across the walls, reminding him of her movements during their battle. "In 300 years, he began, I've never asked an opponent for insight. My combat computers always provided all the analysis I needed. But now," he paused, struggling with concepts his enhanced mind had never needed to consider before. "Now I find myself full of questions." "The best questions often come after defeat," Sarah said gently. It means we're ready to learn. How did you do it? Not just defeat me, but all the others. Every warrior you faced had superior technology, enhanced capabilities, perfect tactical computers. Yet none of them could touch you. Sarah smiled, drawing her katana and laying it carefully between them. Look at this blade, she said. What do you see? Zexthor's natural eyes, not his combat sensors, studied the weapon. Imperfections, microscopic flaws in the metal, signs of wear. By any technological standard, it's primitive. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Yet these imperfections, these marks of use and age, tell a story. Each one represents an adaptation, a lesson learned, a moment of growth. Humans don't seek perfection. We seek understanding. Every flaw is a teacher. She picked up the blade, turning it so it caught the light. Your combat systems are designed to achieve perfect results every time. But in doing so, they've lost the ability to grow, to adapt, to learn from failure. They execute flawlessly, but they cannot evolve. But surely perfection is the goal of all combat training? Zexthor questioned, though his voice held less certainty than before. Is it? Sarah asked. Look at Earth's history. Every time we faced extinction, from ice ages to plagues to our own destructive tendencies, we survived not because we were perfect, but because we could change, adapt, find new ways to solve problems our ancestors never imagined. She resheathed her blade with practiced care. Your technology seeks to eliminate uncertainty. But humans? We embrace it. We thrive on it. Every unpredictable situation is a chance to grow stronger, to understand more deeply, to become something new. Zexthor was quiet for a long moment. The Galactic Council is in chaos, he finally said. Your victory has challenged everything we thought we knew about combat evolution. Some are calling for humans to be banned from future tournaments. And what do you think? I think, he said slowly, that perhaps we have been evolving in the wrong direction. Seeking perfection through technology, we forgot that true growth comes from imperfection, from struggle, from the willingness to fail and learn. Sarah stood, adjusting her sword at her hip. Then perhaps this tournament has served its true purpose, not to prove superiority, but to foster understanding. Will you teach me? Zexthor asked suddenly, surprising himself. Not your combat techniques, but your perspective. It won't be easy, Sarah warned. You'll have to unlearn much of what you think you know. Start from imperfection, embrace uncertainty, find strength in adaptation rather than calculation. Good, the former champion said, rising to his feet. After 300 years of perfect victory, I think I'm finally ready to learn how to fail. As Sarah left the chamber, Zexthor looked at his discarded armor, its surface still gleaming with technological perfection. For the first time, he saw not the pinnacle of combat evolution, but a prison of predetermined responses and calculated certainties. The human had taught him something his combat computers never could, that true strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in the eternal capacity to grow beyond it. Across the galaxy, beings of all species began to look at humanity in a new light. They had expected to find primitive warriors clinging to outdated traditions. Instead, they found teachers who had mastered something more powerful than any technology: the art of endless adaptation, the strength of embracing uncertainty, and the wisdom to find power in imperfection.